Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Charles and Madison lived in Rochester, New York, in a two-story house with a well-kept garden and a routine that, to any neighbor, seemed almost perfectly stable. Married for over 8 years, they were the kind of couple rarely seen arguing in public. He owned an insurance company specializing in asset protection, with a solid client base and a loyal team who admired his work ethic. She, on the other hand, managed one of the region's main pharmacies, known for her dedication and attention to detail. To everyone's eyes, they were a successful couple, financially stable, with organized lives and clear boundaries. But like any well-built routine, there were cracks that went unnoticed. Charles's workload had been increasing over the past few months. With the company's growth came new responsibilities, more aggressive goals, and a growing number of meetings and critical decisions. He started coming home tense, often silent, his mind still racing from the day's commitments. Nights turned long, marked by tossing and turning, staring at the ceiling, and uncomfortable silences that didn't fit the idea of a peaceful home. Madison noticed this quickly. She knew her husband well enough to tell when something was wrong, and even though he didn't say anything, his body spoke, his hunched shoulders, tired eyes, heavy breathing. It was on one of those nights, when he came home particularly irritated, that she got the idea to make him some tea to help him relax. She used a mix of calming herbs she often recommended to customers looking for something natural to sleep better. She handed him the tea in silence, with a kiss on his shoulder. Charles, too tired to question it, drank it and fell asleep. For the first time in weeks, he slept through the entire night. That simple gesture became a habit. On nights when he came home visibly exhausted, Madison would prepare the same tea and leave it by the bed, the lamp already off, while he took his shower. Gradually, Charles began to look forward to that moment. He didn't mention it directly, but the way he looked at the cup before lying down showed the relief he felt. He slept deeply, woke up feeling lighter, and thanked her with a small, quiet smile. Madison, in turn, kept up the ritual naturally, without making a fuss, like someone caring instinctively. To him, it was affection. A silent act of love and support. He didn't see any hidden intentions, never imagined there was anything behind that seemingly harmless routine. In Charles's mind, his wife was just being thoughtful, trying to help his well-being in the way she knew how. And he, too busy to notice the subtle details of daily life, accepted that care as part of what still kept them together, despite the growing distance between them. On that particular night, the scene was no different. Charles arrived again with tense shoulders, sunken eyes, and a heavy expression. He'd had a tough day, full of unproductive meetings and conflicts with important clients. He left his briefcase on the living room table, slowly climbed the stairs, and went straight to the bathroom. While he let the hot water run over his body, trying to relax, Madison prepared the tea as usual. With calm movements, she poured the drink into his favorite mug, the one with his company's name engraved in gold letters, and carried it to the bedroom. She placed it on the nightstand, adjusted the bed cover, turned off the light, leaving only the faint glow from the hallway to light the room. Then, she quietly walked back downstairs. Charles stayed in the shower a few more minutes, feeling the tension in his body slowly ease. In his mind, the night would be just like all the others, hot shower, relaxing tea, deep sleep. But that day, a small, unnoticed change would alter everything. Charles stepped out of the shower feeling lighter, his muscles finally relaxed from the hot water and the steam filling the bathroom. He grabbed a towel, dried himself slowly, and put on an old, comfortable t-shirt. When he entered the bedroom, the dim light from the hallway was still on, and he noticed the cup on the nightstand, as always. He gave a small, sideways smile, as if that silent gesture from his wife was a predictable relief amid the chaos of his days. But unlike other times, he threw himself onto the bed without paying attention to the tea. His body was exhausted, and for the first time in a long while, his mind seemed ready to shut down. Within minutes, Charles fell into a deep sleep, not even remembering the drink sitting right beside him. The house stayed silent for hours. Outside, the streets were empty, wrapped in the usual stillness of a residential neighborhood's night. Charles slept so deeply he didn't hear any noise from downstairs. The night went on until around 3 in the morning, when he woke up with his stomach growling. It was dark, and he felt dry-mouthed and warm, as if thirst and hunger had come together. He sat up slowly, rubbed his eyes, and when he turned his head to the side, he saw the cup still full. He frowned for a second, surprised he hadn't drunk it, but let it go. He got up and noticed his wife wasn't beside him. He grabbed his phone, checked the time, stood up, and went to the kitchen barefoot, looking for a piece of fruit or a glass of water. As he descended the first few steps of the stairs, he noticed a light on coming from the living room. At first, he found it strange but not alarming. Maybe Madison had come down to get something or couldn't sleep. But as he approached the bottom of the stairs, he heard a muffled sound. It wasn't the noise of a TV or footsteps around the house. It was a more intimate, subtle sound, but unmistakable. He froze, his senses instantly sharpening. Crouched slightly, he moved along the railing until he could partially see the living room, and then everything stopped. Madison was on the couch, facing away from him, her head slightly tilted. In front of her, a man was kissing her intensely. Charles recognized the silhouette before he even saw the face. Jason, the neighbor from the house next door, the same one he greeted in the late afternoons, the same man he'd lent tools to, the same one who shared fences and polite small talk. It was him, shirt half open, arms around Madison's back, both lost in an intimacy that screamed betrayal. Charles didn't know what he felt first. Heat rushed from his stomach to his face in seconds. His heart pounded in a strange way, mixing anger, shock, disgust, and disbelief. He stepped down the last stair hard, and the sound of his foot hitting the floor made both of them turn abruptly. Madison turned pale instantly. Jason took a step back, surprised, his face frozen. Charles stared at them with glassy eyes, his voice firm, filled with disbelief. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked. Madison tried to say something, but no words came out. Still sitting, she mumbled disconnected sounds, while Jason remained frozen, as if the floor had vanished beneath him. Charles took one step forward, his gaze sharp. "Is someone going to explain what's going on here, or do I have to guess?" he snapped. Jason took a deep breath, ran a hand over his face, and gave Madison a hesitant look, waiting for her to take the lead. And she did. "Charles, it's not what it looks like," she said, her voice trembling. He took another step closer. "It's not? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what it looks like," he shot back without hesitation. Tension filled the room. Jason quietly stepped back, as if sensing there was no honorable way out. Madison, shaking, slowly stood up. Her tear-filled eyes showed that, despite trying to stay composed, everything was falling apart. "You've been coming home more and more distant, more and more silent, like I didn't even exist. I tried to talk, I tried to get close, but you were always stressed, exhausted, with no space for anything," she argued, trying to justify herself. Charles cut her off without changing his tone. "And because of that, you decided to cheat with the neighbor. In my house." "In the middle of the night," he replied. She took a deep breath, as if trying to stay upright in the face of the avalanche. "I felt so alone. Invisible. Jason showed up when I was weak, vulnerable. It wasn't something I planned. It just happened. And on the days you drank the tea, I knew that." Charles narrowed his eyes, his breath caught. That sentence set off an immediate alarm. "You knew what? That I wouldn't wake up? That I wouldn't notice?" he asked, his voice growing sharper. Silence swallowed the room. Jason looked at Madison, clearly confused by where the conversation was going. Charles took another step, now standing right in front of her. "Madison, answer me. How did you know I wouldn't wake up?" he insisted. She lowered her gaze. Her hands trembled at her sides. Her face, once determined to hold up an explanation, collapsed into guilt. She said nothing. And that silence said everything. The silence that settled over the three of them was piercing. Charles felt like the air in the room had become too thick to breathe. His eyes stayed locked on Madison, who kept her head down, motionless, as if she wanted to disappear right there. Jason, uneasy, shifted his gaze between them, clearly trying to grasp what was really happening. "You put something in the tea, didn't you?" Charles asked, his voice lower but filled with contained tension. "That's why I slept like that, dreamless, never waking up, like I was drugged." Madison stayed silent, but her shoulders began to tremble slightly. Then, finally, she lifted her face. "It was a sedative," she whispered. "Something strong, but legally approved. I took small amounts from the pharmacy. Whenever you came home too worked up, I'd mix it into the tea. You'd sleep deeply, and I'd have time." Jason's eyes widened. "You gave your husband medication to make him sleep without him knowing?" he asked, shocked. "You never told me that." "Because I knew you wouldn't accept it," she replied, her voice breaking. "You thought Charles knew everything, but he didn't know anything. I lied to you too." Charles ran his hands over his face, trying to process it. The betrayal alone was devastating. But being deceived with medication? That was beyond what he could comprehend. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, staring at Madison as if looking at a stranger. "A few weeks," she answered hesitantly. "It started slowly. The first time was when you slept badly and said you couldn't take another night without rest. I just wanted you to rest, but after that, it became routine." Jason took a step back. "I thought you two had an agreement, Madison. That's what you told me from the beginning. That he knew. That it was an open marriage." "I lied," she admitted, voice cracking. "I was scared. And when I realized he never suspected, I kept going." Charles shook his head, completely stunned. "You messed with my mind, Madison. With my body. You knocked me out so you could cheat with the guy next door to our house. This isn't just betrayal. It's something else. This is a crime." Madison collapsed onto the couch, bringing her hands to her face, as if only now realizing what she'd done. Jason stayed standing, frozen, like someone who had just realized he'd been deceived too and, without knowing, had taken part in something serious. "I didn't know about any of this, Charles," Jason said, looking at him. "I swear. I'm not that kind of guy. I trusted her. I believed everything she told me." Charles just stared at him in silence, unable to say a word. Jason's presence now seemed even more absurd, like a misplaced piece in a broken scene. Then Jason turned to Madison, shook his head, and said bitterly, "You're a criminal." Without waiting for a response, he walked toward the front door. He opened it slowly, gave Charles one last look, as if wordlessly asking for forgiveness, and left. The house fell silent again. Madison cried quietly on the couch, and Charles remained standing, staring at the cup still on the nightstand upstairs, now a living piece of evidence of what had really happened over so many nights. He walked toward her, his voice firm and cold. "You're leaving this house first thing tomorrow. I want you to pack all your things now. When the sun comes up, you won't live here anymore." Madison nodded with an almost imperceptible movement. For the first time, she didn't try to argue, justify, or delay. She just lowered her head and slowly got up, as if carrying the real weight of the consequences on her back. Madison spent the rest of the night in silence. She climbed the stairs without making a sound, entered the bedroom she'd shared with Charles until that night, and began gathering her things. Each folded piece felt like a reminder of what she'd lost. She avoided looking at the bed, the nightstand, the untouched cup. The sound of drawers opening and closing was the only noise filling the house. Charles stayed downstairs, sitting at the kitchen table, not touching anything. He sat there, motionless, eyes fixed on nothing, trying to mentally piece back together everything he discovered in the past few hours. At dawn, Madison came down the stairs with 2 suitcases and a backpack. Her swollen face showed she'd been crying for hours, but she didn't try to make eye contact. She didn't apologize, didn't beg. She just walked toward the door, paused for a second as if about to say something, then changed her mind. She left without looking back, getting into a ride-share car that took her straight to her parents' house. Charles, as soon as he heard the door close, picked up the phone and called his lawyer. He explained the facts clearly, avoiding getting lost in the pain. Soon after, he went to the local police station and filed a report. The statement was long and detailed, including the account of unauthorized controlled substances being used in his food. The police advised him to get toxicology tests done as soon as possible. That same day, Charles went to a specialized lab. The results came back in a few days and confirmed it: consistent, repeated traces of sedatives were present in his system. Controlled substances, available only by prescription and restricted to hospitals or authorized pharmacies. With that, a formal investigation was opened, and Madison was called in for questioning. Faced with the evidence, she confessed to using the medication without a prescription and admitted she used her position as pharmacy manager to obtain small amounts without raising suspicion. The preparation was done after hours, diluting the compound into minimal doses that still caused strong effects. Her confession sped up the process, and the case was sent to court. The judge, after hearing testimonies and reviewing medical reports, ruled that Madison would be punished for improper use of controlled substances, tampering with a drink without consent, and serious ethical violations in her professional role. The sentence was clear: a $20,000 fine, immediate loss of her professional license, and a permanent ban from working in any health-related field. Additionally, she was sentenced to 120 hours of supervised community service. The case caused a huge stir in town. The pharmacy where Madison worked immediately terminated her contract and issued a public statement condemning her actions. The reputation she'd built over the years collapsed within days. On social media, rumors, judgments, and opinions flew from every direction. But what weighed most on her wasn't public opinion, it was the emptiness now filling her life. Charles, on the other hand, received support from close friends, family, and co-workers. Based on the case documents and proof of his ex-wife's criminal behavior, his lawyer managed to secure full ownership of the house, along with most of the couple's assets, including investments and a vehicle. The court recognized that he had been the victim of a premeditated scheme and that the psychological impact of the betrayal went beyond any equal division of property. Despite the legal victories, Charles didn't feel victorious. The house felt too big, too empty. Every room held memories he'd rather forget. For a few days, he avoided the bedroom, preferring to sleep on the living room couch. He started going to work earlier, returned to the gym, but inside, he felt broken. The trust he once had in people seemed violently ripped away. And he knew the emotional recovery process would be much slower than any legal one. In the following months, he sank into a lonely routine. Social interactions became increasingly rare. He turned down invitations, avoided family events, and distanced himself from the few friends he still kept in touch with. The idea of trusting someone again seemed absurd. He felt any closeness was a threat. The mug that once symbolized affection was now a painful reminder. For a long time, he kept it hidden in the back of a drawer he never opened again. It wasn't until after the first year that Charles agreed to start therapy sessions. At first, he said very little. But over time, he began revisiting the events with less guilt and more clarity. He started to understand that his wife's betrayal wasn't a reflection of his failure as a husband, but of her choices. Still, the weight remained, invisible, pushing his desire to start over deep into his soul. Only after 4 years was he able to lower his guard. He met a woman at a business seminar, someone from outside the city, with her own life and no connection to his past. The relationship started slowly, cautiously, with no expectations. For the first time in a long time, Charles felt he could trust someone without fear of being deceived. It wasn't love yet. But it was a beginning. Jason, meanwhile, was also deeply affected by what happened. He gave testimony to the court, provided messages exchanged with Madison, and it became clear he had been manipulated from the start. The claim that Charles knew and accepted the relationship was dismantled by the toxicology reports and Madison's own confessions. Legally, he was cleared. There was no formal punishment. But that didn't erase the embarrassment of getting involved with his neighbor's wife, a man who had always treated him with respect. Soon after the scandal broke, Jason quit his job and put his house up for sale. He told close friends he needed to start over somewhere far away. Within less than 3 months, he moved to a small town a few hours away, where no one knew his past. He started from scratch, trying to rebuild his life without carrying the shame that had haunted him since the night he was caught. Though innocent in the eyes of the law, he knew he had contributed to a personal tragedy. And that haunted him more than any legal case ever could. Madison, in the end, faced the longest and most painful consequence. After leaving Charles's house, she was taken in by her parents, who welcomed her with a mix of disappointment and shame. Her mother, though present, avoided the topic. Her father, stricter, barely spoke to her. The silence at home weighed heavier than any formal punishment. With her license revoked and her name ruined, Madison spent months trying to find another job, but no company would hire her after the scandal. The community service ordered by the court was completed under constant supervision, and even there, she was viewed with suspicion. Without a steady income, she started doing occasional cleaning jobs and odd gigs at informal shops. Her standard of living dropped drastically. She lived in a small room at her parents' house, and the space that once symbolized her independence now represented her downfall. Friends disappeared, messages stopped, and loneliness became her constant companion. Madison never reached out to Charles again. Not even once. She knew the choices she made cost her everything: her marriage, her career, her dignity. And though she told herself she acted out of loneliness, deep down she knew the truth was harsher. She had dug her own grave, step by step, cup by cup, lie by lie. Charles, on the other hand, despite years of silence, found some peace in the honesty of his rebuilding. He still carried scars. He still had tough days. But now he knew it was possible to keep going. And that's what he did. Every day, little by little. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.